Chapter 8, Celebration Day. Finally, in the spring of 1883, the bridge was complete. It had cost more than $15 million to build, more than twice as much as originally planned, and it had taken 14 years from start to finish. There were 14,000 miles of wire in the cables. There were thousands of tons of stone in the towers. With all the steel in the roadway, the bridge alone weighed more than 14,000 tons. The steel roadway was now in place for horses and carriages. A wooden walkway was built right down the middle of the bridge so that people could walk across. The walkway was higher than the road. That way, people could walk above the traffic, not beside it. There were also trains built into the bridge for people who wanted to ride across. The ramps leading up to the bridge from New York and Brooklyn were also complete. But Washington Roebling had still never set foot on the bridge. Would he go in person now? No, he still didn't want to leave the house. He asked that Emily go in his place. So, on a spring day, before the bridge was opened to the public, Emily got in a carriage in Brooklyn and rode across the bridge. She was the first person to cross the finished Brooklyn Bridge. Then, on May 24, 1883, the bridge was opened to the public. New York and Brooklyn held a huge celebration. Thousands of people came to see the opening of the bridge. Hotels were packed full. Restaurants were jammed. Stores, banks, and schools were closed for the day. Almost no one went to work. The day was declared a holiday for all to enjoy. Boats with flags filled the harbor. They all tooted their whistles. Houses and store windows were decorated for the event with flags and ribbons. Bands played everywhere. The bridge seemed like a miracle. It stood massive and tall against the small buildings in New York and Brooklyn. It was larger than any other man-made structure at the time, except for the Great Pyramids in Egypt. The President of the United States, Chester A. Arthur, came for the bridge opening. Governor Grover Cleveland of New York was there too. No one knew it then, but Grover Cleveland would become the next President of the United States. At 2 o'clock that sunny afternoon, the President and the Governor walked across the bridge from the New York side. They were accompanied by soldiers and a marching band. The mayor of Brooklyn and some important bridge officials walked from the Brooklyn side. Emily and many family members joined them. They all met in the middle and shook hands. The band played "Hail to the Chief," a song that's always played when the president enters a room. They played it 4 times. Cannons were shot off. Every boat in the harbor blasted its whistles or horns. The bridge wasn't open to everyone yet. 7,000 tickets had been given out to people so they could walk on the bridge that first day. Even with the tickets, people shoved and pushed. Some people's clothes got torn. Everyone wanted to see the president. After the first day, the price was 1 penny to walk across the bridge, 5 cents to ride a horse across, 5 cents to ride the bridge train, and 10 cents to take a horse and carriage. Washington Roebling sat at home by his window, watching the whole thing. Would he ever get the honor and glory he deserved? He could not bring himself to leave the house, even to meet the president. So Emily arranged for the president to come to him. Late that afternoon, a huge party was held at their house in Brooklyn. Roses, lilacs, and calla lilies were everywhere. The stair railing was covered with flowers. The outside of the house was draped in flowers, flags, and banners too. A sculptor had made a bust of Washington Roebling. A bust is a statue of someone's head. Emily put a wreath with tiny American flags on its head. Outside in the garden, there were tables with food and drinks. A band played music in the house from the balcony. When the president arrived at 5:30 that afternoon, Emily and Washington greeted him. They shook hands. Washington stood and talked with the president for a few minutes. Then, Washington sat on the sofa quietly while more than 1,000 people filled his house. The president stayed for about an hour. Once he was gone, Washington was free to go back upstairs. He needed a rest. As Washington left the party, everyone burst into applause. It was just what Emily had hoped, that the world would finally show her husband the honor and respect he deserved. The celebration wasn't over yet, though. That night, there was an enormous fireworks display. Bands played for an hour while 14 tons of fireworks were shot off from the bridge. Hundreds of thousands of people watched from rooftops, boats, piers, and streets. The fireworks could be seen from 18 miles away. At the end of the fireworks, there were 500 rockets shot off at once. At midnight, the bridge was officially opened to everyone for a penny. Crowds of people pushed and shoved. Everyone wanted to be first. One man walked across playing the bagpipes. The city of New York didn't sleep at all that night. By morning, people were still walking across the Brooklyn Bridge. From that day on, the Brooklyn Bridge became one of the city's best-loved landmarks. After the bridge, Washington and Emily lived happily for many years after the bridge was built. Washington's health improved, and the two of them traveled to Europe. Their son graduated from Rensselaer, the same college Washington had attended. Emily went to college too. She got a law degree at New York University. She also traveled to Russia alone. While she was there, the Russian Tsar Nicholas was crowned and Emily was invited. Back in New York, she and Washington walked across the Brooklyn Bridge. Emily died in 1903, but Washington lived much longer. He was a millionaire by now from the wire business and his stock investments. He was still in pain much of the time, but he married again. His second wife's name was Cornelia Farrow. In the last years of his life, he went back to running the wire company and made it even more successful. He died on July 21st, 1926, at the age of 89.